He's Thrax's brother. Booth's got beef with that guy. Well, I guess that means I got beef with this guy. He's low enough level. Hopefully I can... Well, hang on. We did have points, didn't we? There we go. We have all the combat
my
abilities.
other topic was, what is your thoughts? Because I came across this, and I think we may have touched on this topic before, but I couldn't remember what
I did unlock this, so it really just doesn't work against...
response was to it, especially based on your Stoic core as far as most of your philosophical principles. As far as the notion or at least the mental possibility of duality.
What? What does that have to do with Stoicism?
Well, it doesn't specifically have to do with Stoicism, but I would imagine based on its principle that it's somewhat in contrast to most popular Stoic beliefs, which is that you find surety and truth and all that other stuff, whereas with duality it's far more...
Not really. That's not really that much of a core thing.
What is
But
it?
duality is also not the antithesis of truth either, though.
No, I'm not suggesting it is. I just was, for me, it aligned with most of my
If I were to jump into this water, would I
nuanced
die?
kind of philosophical nuances, I suppose, within this. I know you can't dive in the water. I've tried that. It's got some
Oh, it's an invisible
actual
wall.
wall. They do a good job at hiding it a little bit better nowadays, but... There's an invisible wall nonetheless. But, you know, for me, it's... Number one, it's certainly a very... Having done study and, you know, training in martial arts and things like that, in balance and, you know, within Eastern philosophy especially, you know, balance and harmony and kind of keeping things in neither either or, but almost both and, already not yet, those kinds of states. That duality works very well within Eastern philosophy, and it works for me for the most part as far as my philosophical approaches. But I was just curious what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I suppose I could
Like,
one-up you with a Taoist thing and say there is no duality. Say that what you're perceiving as different things or not.
Somebody sneaking around.
I'm not sneaking at all, pal. I'm actually being quite brazen. And apparently that works. Well, okay, I do have... Okay, no, I don't think it's going to work for much longer.
Well, I mean...
I've stumped you.
No, it's... On a practical level, what is that? How does that play out for your own...
Well, I don't think yours plays out practically either.
No, it does.
It's all just sort of perspective.
No, it's not purely perspective. I can be, again, in a state of becoming and having arrived at the same time. In, like, you know, religiously we talk about being sanctified, but also
yeah, but see, I don't think that's
you know,
practical.
those kinds of things.
Because there's nothing you do. Like, to say that that's a godly thing, it's like, okay, fine, sure, but that doesn't... I'm not doing that. You're not being two things at once. It's more of a philosophical framework to view something that is ultimately...
No, I would
be
say it's a
viewed.
state of understanding that you can
Why does
be...
he have an icon above his head?
That you're in process, I suppose, is the... That there's not a singularity to your
What does this guy got?
state and or being at any given moment.
Yeah,
That's
but
what I
then
mean
you're
by
not
duality.
becoming anything.
No, you are.
Or you aren't anything, and you're only becoming.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's not duality at that point.
For me, it's more
You can't go anywhere without coming from anywhere. You could
thought
argue that
that
that's duality, but it doesn't affect how you get there. It's like
I
all
thought-
things that you could call dualities are really just one thing. That's the Taoist one up, one uno reverse.
Well, in what way though are they just one thing?
Well, because
Just because they say that it is doesn't
yeah,
mean
but you
it
could
is.
also say that they're two different things, and that's just you saying it.
Well, in the same
So again,
way.
it doesn't make a difference. So that's why I'm
Well, it
saying
doesn't make a difference,
no
but
matter
I'm
what you
saying
view,
what-
I don't think it's I don't think you can argue that it's a practical thing. Because in either
You're
case,
saying on
can
one
you
side or
actually?
the other. The reason why I thought it was worth bringing up is because it helped, at least on a sophistic level, me say, okay, it adds a bit of clarity to my statement about truth being both relative and sure.
When have you made that statement?
Well, you had a hang up when I initially had talked about.
Oh, you dumb lying son of a gun! Oh, he's this guy. I'll be almost sad when I kill you. Oh, I should have used the barrels. Can I use them now? I'll sacrifice myself. Barrels, come on. We're all going together. Maybe he's weak to fire. No, not really. That didn't hurt him that much. Yo! He's gonna keep doing that, apparently. What on earth? That is the strangest thing in the world. Oh, hold still. Oh, I'm out of stuff. Kill him! No, 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 don't do that. Get out of here, pal, you're not wanted. Ah! Ooh. What was that, pal?
If it's one
He just really won't stop.
it's men folk without the decency to stay there.
Okay, I'm doing you a solid here, pal. You could at least... Ah! Ooh. Uh-oh, what's going on? I'm still out of that. Never mind. Buddy, I really just need you to stay out of this. I'm doing this for you! Yay! Pal! Oh, he smacked him. Okay, he's low. He's low. Dude, I am seriously doing this for your benefit.
You just
Are you gonna get him?
castrated him, and then you're gonna cut his head.
I do not like looking you in the eye. Something about your face unnerves me. Ooh. Yay! Oh, it's gone all cinematic. Yay! Can I get Booth right now?
Probably.
Oh no, because this was technically like a mission thing. So I've just helped him level up.
Nope.
Oh,
Still
hey,
there.
pal. Alright, I'll deal with you next. I was gonna... Oh, okay, are you serious after all I've just done for you?
See that?
Well, this... I might serve... He may not... Oh, he is. Sometimes they don't walk away when
That
they
kind
do
of
that.
stuff, though, it's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. How can you...
Well, I don't like that it's not
They're not setting
consistent.
that up in a way that's like, okay, it
'Cause
makes sense
sometimes-
that you're humiliated right now.
Well, because
No.
sometimes they take
I just
longer.
came off a win. Did you see that I dropped that guy?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
That
but
doesn't make any sense.
It's more annoying that sometimes you get more than one chance and sometimes you don't, and I don't know what the distinguishing thing is.
Anyway, no, what I mean is that it seems to...
The only time we ever discussed this
Answer
was in your
a-
sophist thing,
Yeah,
which
that's what I was saying.
still find strange.
Well, strange, maybe, but
Because
I...
it seems retroactive is all I'm saying.
No, it's not retroactive. What I'm saying is,
It
how is
seems like it is.
How is it retroactive?
In
I've
that
gone
it-
back and listened to the video, and I was saying the same thing even at the beginning, which was that, again,
Well-
there was a... it's just a...
Well, because the
Caucasian
thing,
in
it
pants.
seems, is that you want to call yourself a sophist, so you're reframing what sophistry means when most people
we've
wouldn't
talked
agree.
about this before, which maybe they won't agree, but that's fine. What I'm saying
Yeah, but that
is,
means you're going to... If you're having to correct every person who
I'm
you
not
talk to...
correcting them. What I'm saying
Because their
is,
perception of the word is different than the one you want them to have, I think you're...
What I'm saying is I'm not as distantly in discord to sophist principles in general than you might think I am. You were...
Then you acted as though you conceded.
No.
You kind of did.
No.
You were like, yeah, all right, because even the guy you said you like most agreed with conceded.
No, again, we talked about that too, which was, again, he talked to... The idea was that Sophocles said, okay, I could see where it was morality, I think that they were talking about, or truth can be taught, and argument could be taught, whereas he was trying to argue that certain things were not unteachable, but just
That's
inerrant.
not what we were discussing at all.
Yeah, it was.
We were discussing
that.
it wasn't Sophocles, it was Plato.
No, that he was talking to?
Yeah,
No,
it
it
was
was
in-
Sophocles. I'm fairly
Plato.
confident.
Because it was Plato's book called Protagoras.
Yes,
Protagoras
but
is the
he
guy
was
we were
talking about. He was
talking-
talking to Socrates.
So you said you didn't. You
Did I
said
say-
Sophocles.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant, Socrates.
But even then, Socrates won that argument. You agreed.
No, I didn't, because
You
both of them
most
conceded
certainly
to one
did.
another.
Not in the.
They
No.
did.
Socrates definitely was the. In the logical sense, the correct one, because the argument that the problem is, sophistry is, by anyone you ask's definition, the argument, whatever you can argue is correct, whether it's morally right or not. Therefore,
Correct.
Yes, and Protagoras agreed that's not the case. That virtue exists outside of argument, and now you got me doing it. All that Socrates conceded is, argument does have merit.
And that
And-
morality within that realm can be taught.
Yes, but
Whereas
virtue
before,
nonetheless exists regardless of how you argue it. Simply making a successful argument does not make you correct. That's the point, and Protagoras conceded that, saying, yes, simply because you argue something does not make it correct.
Maybe
And that's where I'm saying,
inherently not-
I think you're attempting to reclaim a word that the world has well and truly gotten over.
No, what I'm saying is, I had mentioned in that discussion many times that I believe that truth can be variable. It can be something that is.
Yeah, but that's where I would disagree with you.
And this is why I think duality helps in this respect, is because, again, I think it's a both and. It's an already and not yet kind of
Yeah,
concept.
let's even know. You're gonna have to apply that, because you can't just say it and then say that makes it so.
And I've said this already, which is that in the same way that I believe that the truth of
You're gonna have
you
to
know,
apply
my
it to something
belief
more
in-
concrete than salvation.
well, no, because
'Cause salvation itself
is
doesn't-
metaphysics. Philosophically, you absolutely have to include
No,
that.
but
You
truth
can't
isn't
just-
metaphysics.
No, but there are truths within metaphysical context.
Well, no, metaphysics is the attempt to define truth.
No. Metaphysics
Well,
is
it's
anything
one of
that's
the-
not tangible.
Okay, one of the things it's seeking is what is. I mean, I guess sure, it is that which is sort of. I wouldn't say it's exclusively the intangible, but
What I was getting at was that, and I guess I'll try to put it in these terms.
18 seems to be the
Because we had
lowest.
talked about time, and I know we had discussed the idea of certain things being taught to be true in the past versus
Okay, but see
true
that
now, those kinds of
my
things.
argument is unchanged that being taught as true does not make it true.
Right.
But you
what
seem
I'm
to think,
saying
well, it
is
does,
there's
and
a
the truth
duality of
changes.
saying I am confident of something that is truth today. Like, okay,
And then if it's just, but the thing
and
is,
then
if
in
it's
the future is if it's disproved, that is a variability to truth that I go, I can't know that is going to be unshifting. Does that make sense? Even salvationally, I say.
But the point
This
is,
is
the
where
argument then is that it
Pauline
was never true.
Pauline theology and philosophy would agree with this, which is that he says basically, again, people should pity us if we are wrong, because he recognizes that if we get to the other side of eternity, and you go,
what you're talking
we
about
end
is
up-
certainty, and certainty and truth aren't the
Exactly.
same.
Well,
You're acting like, well, simply because I believe it and it's taught to be true, therefore it is.
Doesn't mean
And
it
if it
is.
changes, well, then that will be true, and then both things will have both been true, but they will never have
no,
been
it's
true
a
at the same
duality
time.
of I can't be sure, but I can be sure. That's my point.
Well, no, that's just not possible. That's what faith is literally means, is being sure of, or is believing in things you can't be sure of.
But again, the idea that
If you want to just say that more things are faith than people believe, I'd agree with you there.
everything.
But that doesn't mean...
And I think that's what we came down to.
But that would seem like you're giving up the argument you just made.
What?
Because we're saying it's not belief. It's not... If you... I forget what the wording you just said was, I think, the wording that I was addressing when I responded, and now you're agreeing with my wording.
No,
I've
what
already
I'm
forgotten what it was.
No, what I said was belief is what. Yes, absolutely. That everything requires belief. That is true, and we, I think, said that from the beginning. That it's not. There are things that you will not be able to know with certainty, because.
But that doesn't make them... See, you're now trying to argue that because you can't know them for certain, then they can both be true. It's like, well, no. It just means you won't know. One of them, it remains the truer of the two.
It's a bit of the.
I don't know how to freaking kill you,
It's
even
the,
though you're
it's the
mostly
duality
dead.
of Schrodinger's cat is what it is. It's the.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, Schrodinger wouldn't even agree with you. If Schrodinger used it as an experiment to describe quantum physics and how it's unreliable,
Well,
and
it's not
people
just
have
that it's
basically taken it
unreliable.
to
Again,
mean,
it's impossible
oh, that means
to-
both things are true at once, and it's like that was never
It's
his
not that
intention.
it's no, I agree. It's not his intention. My point is he is trying to explain how something can be in it's a confluence of nothing's happening yet, so we're not sure. But that in itself creates this kind of either or principle.
Yeah, but that doesn't
It's a
make them
balance.
both true. That's the point, is that when he says the cat is both dead and alive, he's describing a quantum metaphysical state that isn't real. Because once
Correct,
you
in the
look in
same
the
way that
box, one of
truth,
the
I
truth
think,
things
is.
exists. And that becomes the
but in
dominant one
but
and the
in
only one. The
correct,
other one
but
ceases
in the
to be.
state that we live, we have to live in that quantum realm of.
Well, then you're just saying that nothing can be known.
Well, yes,
And that
that's true.
everything requires faith. But that's not the same thing as saying two things can be true at once.
Well, known to me is truth.
Well, see, that's where I
if
would
it's
just fundamentally
required-
disagree.
Okay, what would you describe as truth? If it does,
The definition of truth would be a constant that does not change.
but again, if it's constant, then it is sure.
Yes, that's what the definition of truth is.
That's certain.
Yes, that's why I'm only
And I'm
applying
sa-
that to truth. So
Right,
if
and I'm
something
saying
changes, it was
nothing
never
is true
true.
then.
But see, that's where I would say
And yet everything has to be.
no. See, I don't know how you get there. That doesn't make any sense to me. Because
My
you could,
point-
I can understand the argument. Well, then how do we know what's true? Because we
Right,
don't know
that's-
what isn't going
well,
to
that's
change.
what I mean.
That's a
Nothing
fundamental
can be
question.
known. That's the.
I wouldn't say nothing. That's where I would disagree, is that you're taking a relativistic view that simply because we can't know, or we are imperfect at knowing things, that therefore the things themselves can't be known. It's like the question of what is true
I
has
suppose
always been the biggest question.
I suppose that's the argument.
Like to believe that there is such a thing as truth does not mean that you will always know that truth. And
Well, I suppose the great question, and something you just said is very apropos, is that the question becomes: is it the truth to be known that is imperfect or flawed, or is it us
it's us.
being
It's
able
always
to
the knower.
grasp it? Which
Yeah.
is, I agree. That's
The capacity to know truth
the capacity
does
to
not.
know it is the
is
problem.
not-
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that is very much the truth. I would concur with that.
Well, then what do you? But see now, how are you using it in that case?
Well, again, to me it.
Yes, get it over with.
Always enjoy killing you, Ranger.
How is he the
But
choker?
it's
I'm
the
confused.
quiet time of
Like
Don't ask.
wearing chokers.
He's,
He's gonna use those two sickles to choke you.
He's into things. Just don't ask.
Okay, so what is he? You're not. It's not giving you counter options. You just. How are you countering?
Not yet. Ah! Okay, well that time I didn't do it right. When he does the A thing, I just kind of mash it and see what happens, because it doesn't actually make much sense. Pillars
Seems like
in my
you're
way.
staying far away from it.
Well, because anytime he does that, I'm mostly just leaving. This isn't a counter, that's just the execution move. He's actually incredibly weak. How did we die to him so many times?
Because I apparently suck at handling anybody that can't.
Get him!
Like any of those, are you using Y?
For those guys, yeah, when the prompt comes up. Bag him!
You stupid chop! You love
There you go!
Don't try again!
I know I'm supposed to be dominating you, but your name's not good enough. Oh, whoa, whoa, that is a massive area! I don't even want to kill you from in person, I just want to kill you from far away. Now, come on, you're so close to death. There we go.
Oh, the things I would have done to you.
You. They don't go trying to be fancy now. Huh.
No, it seems to help, at least for me, allow for that balance of uncertainty with certainty. I mean, both obviously exist.
Well, see,
It's
that's where I
just
guess
a-
I'm saying I don't think it counts as. That's where I'm saying you can't have both. That's just what faith is. Faith is to believe in things
Yes,
that are
but-
uncertain.
But that
So that's
is
not the same thing
but
as certainty.
Faith, there are so many things in faith, even in Scripture, theologically, that are already not, already and not yet. Again, it's that
Yeah, but see, I don't.
stage.
But that's not certainty.
It's balance.
No, it's not. It's just not certainty. You can't be certain of something that's uncertain. You can only believe in something that's uncertain.
Well, then you can't.
that is what makes
then,
it
then
faith.
again, but that's my point. Then within anything
not
that
faith if you
requires
can know
faith,
it.
it can't be truth.
No, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, because you could have faith in something you can't prove and have it also turn out to be true.
It could be.
Well, no, but
you
that's the thing.
can't
Well,
claim
I
it
made
to
this
be
argument.
true
Yes, you
until-
can. I believe now that's where we made this argument before, that I could say completely with no proof at all that there are aliens on the moon. I could just say that I believe it, and if someday there turns out yes there are actually aliens on the moon, then I had faith in something that also turned out to be true.
that turned out
But
to-
because I didn't have the certainty, it was still faith at the time.
yes,
The proof
but as
does
you
not make it
state
no longer
But
true.
practically, as you state that philosophical approach, if it's unsure in the moment, it cannot be true for you.
No, see that's where that's where truth.
Because we just
truth.
talked about certainty being a requisite for.
No, I don't. I don't believe that's what I have said, and that's not what I meant. Because I am taking an external view that truth is truth, no matter who knows it. Yes, the tree makes the sound if
Right,
no
and
one's there to hear it.
that's a good argument. I agree with
I am.
that.
That's the approach. They're saying simply because it is not known does not make it less true,
Yes.
or simply because it can't be certain because
But
there
the
isn't
way
evidence
but
yet.
the way in which I communicate it is what I'm saying is, yeah, do I think on a faith level, absolutely, that certain things are true, that I have faith in, that I can't be 100% certain of, but I can still say I believe them to be true? Yes, but even the way I just framed that is I believe them to be true. It's not.
Yes, but that doesn't make them not true.
No, but it doesn't make them true either. It's a both and.
No, well,
right
see,
now.
but but you're saying
That's
simply
that
to say
balance
that it
thing.
doesn't make it true does not mean it isn't true. The fact that it's not certain doesn't negate it's true. Because I don't have to have the proof that there's aliens on the moon for them to be there. And if they are there, it's the truth whether I can prove it or not. Now, simply my stating it is not what makes it true. That's why the external part of it is so important. Because you seem to be taking it only becomes true when someone who believes it is correct. And it's like that makes it entirely dependent on the person. Whereas it's, in my opinion, it's an
think
external thing.
But then your external requirement then means that metaphysically you can't apply truth. and that's hard. Like, that's a difficulty.
But why can you not?
Because anything that is not tangible can't be then
Well, but some
truth.
things are tangible. There are some
Some
truths that are.
things are tangible, but
So
what
those
I'm saying
truths
is
can be
that
applied.
would no longer be metaphysical at that point.
Well, sure.
That's what I
The
just
whole
said.
point of metaphysics is things that can't be proven, because otherwise they wouldn't be metaphysics. They would just be physics. If we had scientific proof for everything, then there would be no need for philosophy anymore.
Well,
Philosophy
but
is how you deal with
but
the things
that's
that can't be proven scientifically.
Hence why, again, the whole point of my statement about sophistry being a balance of the both and
It isn't a balance. It's
But
just
again,
what
it's
I argue is correct until I choose to
until
argue
somebody
something
is
else.
able to argue that it isn't.
Yeah, but that doesn't make it true. Neither of those things make it correct.
No, but it
But that-
certainly
they-
gives
but they
validity
negate
to
the
one
concept of
statement or
truth.
the other. They don't.
They would, though, because they're saying there is...
Protagoras didn't.
Well, yes, because he conceded to Socrates.
He didn't concede. He
You
said both
yourself admitted he conceded in the argument.
No, I said both of them conceded to one another.
I
is
don't
what
agree with
said.
that interpretation because Socrates...
You may not agree with the certain interpretation, but I did certainly say that.
Well, I'm not talking about what you said. I'm saying we
I
had
am.
discussed it, and you even seemed to agree that Protagoras conceded to Socrates more.
I wouldn't have said
Because
more.
the sophists, regardless of Protagoras, were people who believed that it doesn't really matter what's true so long as you can argue for it. And it's
On a
well,
practical
that's
level,
where I would
yes. But
disagree,
that's the
because
same
I
thing
do
with
believe that there
law.
are things that are outside of the truth.
Yes, but
Or rather
I'm
that the
saying
truth
that's
is
even
outside of
true-
something.
That's even true to this day in that, like, for instance, if you take something like law, and I think I made this
Yeah, but law is a social construction.
It is.
You can't rely on it as a source
it's
of
not
truth.
it's not that I'm relying on it as for truth's sake. What I'm saying is, on a practical use level, that is true. That argument makes it so.
Well, yeah, but that's a unique case because that is exclusively in the case of
Sure, it may
a
be
social
a unique
construct.
case, but it's a case nonetheless. That
Yeah, but law, there's no such
context-
thing as truth within law. Other than, I guess, the question of what does the law say? Because you could argue that, okay, well, we can confirm that the law says this, but that does not make what the law says true. Because law is in itself a social construct.
Yes,
Like,
but
law
to say
doesn't
that
exist
there's no
except for the
truth in
things that
laws.
people argue. So obviously, you can't...
Oh, I thought you took him out.
I apparently didn't. I killed somebody else. I now have intel on him, though.
Oh yeah, because he walked away. That's right. He was a.
I'm saying you don't go looking to things that are social constructs for truth because they arise by means other than truth. Science is a realm of attempting to find truth, at least in the physical sense.
So what would be a realm of trying to find truth in the non-physical sense? Because there has to be. Then that would be
Well, I
philosophy,
mean,
arguably.
Well, yeah, that's what philosophy aims to do, but that doesn't...
Which is, again, on an Eastern level, their approach is Eastern philosophy says balance is better than singularity. Their argument would be the yin. This is going to push the envelope slightly,
No,
but the
'cause
yin and the yang
is-
of
yin and
evil
yang-
and good.
Yeah, but see, no,
and
they don't apply
converse
that
of-
morally
No, I
usually.
understand they morally don't apply it typically, but what I'm saying is you use it even outside of morally. The truth versus non-truth, whatever. That
Yeah, but that's
is
just... But
flowing
all that yin
together
yang proves
in the-
is what I said earlier, which is that there is actually no such thing as duality. Yin and yang are one thing. You can't have one without the other. That's the
that
point
are
of it.
constantly moving. It's what I'm saying.
It's not that they're constantly
It's
moving,
balance.
it's that there is one thing. It's two sides of one coin. You can't separate them. They're physically inseparable.
They're inseparable, but they are different and distinct.
Okay, but that's not what I'm arguing.
But I'm
My
saying
argument is that they don't exist
that is
apart from
du-
one another.
Sure.
Therefore, they aren't two different things. So there's no such thing
in
as duality
defining
with something that's
duality-
one thing. In
But
the same way
again,
that you
singular-
cannot go somewhere without coming from somewhere. Those are one state. They aren't two different states, despite the fact that they can be described that way. You can under no circumstances go somewhere without coming. So,
You're coming from somewhere.
and going to somewhere at the same
And
time.
going
You
to
can never
somewhere at the
come
same
from
time.
somewhere
That's
without
duality.
going. No, but I'm saying, but only in language. Again, only in social construct, because it's impossible to come from someplace without going somewhere else.
No, you are doing both at the same time. You are coming from one place and going to another
No,
place.
because if to say, well, you're doing both at the same time implies that there's a hypothetical reality in which they could be separated. It's like, well, no,
It's
you.
not
if,
about them being
if two
separated,
things
it's about
can't
them
be
being
done,
distinct.
if two things can't be done separately, then they are not separate. So you might, you
I'm
can't
not
do them
suggesting
at
they
the same
are
time.
I'm not suggesting they need to be done separately. Neither would Eastern philosophy. again.
No, Eastern philosophy say you're doing one thing. You're not doing two things.
They don't say that you're doing one thing.
No, they
say
absolutely.
That
that's all that Taoism is the
talking
dissolution of these kinds of dualities. Taoism is all about removing
it's
dualities.
dilution in that it doesn't boil it down to a singularity, though.
It
That's
does.
not what it does.
And not in the
doesn't.
Western sense of a singularity, but it's saying
that's
that
what I'm
it's
saying.
one thing.
So, but that's what I'm saying.
To go and come
The
is one
Western
action.
sense of truth is not something that the Eastern philosophical approach would ascribe to. They would say truth is fluid and transient.
I don't think they would. I've never come across such arguments.
I would say the Tao is larger.
It's not fluid.
Than,
It's unknowable, but that's not the same
well,
thing.
unknowable. Again, okay, so we're back to the certainty concept.
I've
where
never
it's
I've
like-
never attempted to say that truth requires certainty.
But the
And if I said that at some point, then that was a misapplication of language, because something can be true whether anyone is certain of it or not.
yes, but it can't be demonstrated as true.
But that doesn't matter. I don't believe truth requires demonstration, because that
But
implies
then
that it's
in
only.
practicality, how you then interact with truth becomes.
I said it doesn't require demonstration. That doesn't mean it can't have demonstration.
No,
You
I
can
understand
demonstrate
that.
certain truths,
For sure,
and
but
certain
then
truths
how do you-
and those truths can therefore be applied.
How do you universally then?
I'm not. I
have
never
a-
said that there's such a thing as like universal. This truth can be applied. Not all truths, I suppose, can be applied, but that doesn't make them less true. Because some truths have physical manifestations and some don't. It's just it's a
But if they don't have physical manifestations, how can they be true? Because you talked about.
because they can still be
about
true. Just because you can't know them
tangibility
doesn't
being a
make
part
them
of-
not true.
Yeah, but you talked about again tangibility and the
never
scientific process being a part of.
Well, it's one of
what
the ways truth can be
defines
defined,
truth.
but it's only but that's purely for the things that can be physically defined. Not
So
everything can
how-
be.
Agreed.
And that doesn't make the other things untrue. Saying this is just the one area that is involved with defining truth in the physical sense. There are other areas that are aiming for truth in the non-physical sense. I'm not saying science is the only truth. I'm saying science is one of the means of
But I don't
discovering
know that
truth.
you can say purely that, like for instance, some may call something like medicine, they may frame it as some sort of magical or mystic context of accomplishing something, and somebody else may go, okay, no, it's science.
It doesn't make it less true.
But my point is, on a language level, one of those things has to be the case.
No, they can. Well, that would depend, I suppose, on perspective, but
that's
it
what
doesn't
you're-
change the fact that you could say this herb does this effect. One man has a theory as to why, the other has a different theory as to why.
Right,
But
both
both of them are
both
correct
of
in
those things
saying
are
that.
correct.
Well,
and
yeah,
that-
but that's
and
because
a-
that they agree on the broadest level, which is this thing causes this.
But that's a duality within language. And
Yeah, but language isn't the only
But again, you were
means
talking
of
about
truth.
framing it only. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you talked about that being some sort of social construct, and I go,
Well, language is a social construct.
but then again, duality exists within that, which is the tools that we have. The
It's
building
not
blocks
the only
we have
tool
is
we have,
language.
though.
Yes, that's true. It's not the only tool we have, but it's a tool.
But that
we
also
use
doesn't-
in primary philosophy. I mean,
Okay, but I'm not sure what the point is. What your point there is in that vein. Where are you trying to get to with that argument, though?
because both perspectives are true.
Well, no.
Yes.
One of their theories is correct, and the others is wrong.
No,
Yes.
because
the
it's
one
about
thing-
framing.
No, because here's the thing. The scientist would say these are the chemicals that interact with the body in this way to produce this effect. So he's
Correct.
got the explanation as to why the thing happens. But the medicine man just knows this herb does this. He thinks he knows why, because he might argue that there's a spirit in it that causes your body to react a certain way. And I mean, the difficulty with a claim like that is literally an unscientific claim. There's no way to test it. So I suppose you could argue that, well, you can't disprove him because the only
I'm
way
not
you
saying
can
that's
prove
a good
something is by
argument.
posing
See, and I don't.
a possible.
I've hated that argument from the beginning because anytime somebody says that it can because it can't be proven as untrue, then it must be true. That
Well, that's a
irritates me, 'cause
fallacy,
that's,
so
yeah,
that's-
exactly 100%.
I'm saying both men are not correct as to how it happens. Both are simply correct in identifying cause and effect. Woo, hello.
Whoa, that was weird.
It was weird. Can he hurt me from there?
Find the grave walker.
They're both dense.
Can I kill him from here?
Oh,
Hi, everyone's dense. He's crawling through me.
dumb as a sack of rocks.
Okay, well, that guy's not. That guy's got the sense. Oh, okay, fine. Rage for y'all. Yeah, come on, bring it on.
I love how that guy's slowly falling into his own demise. He sees it coming too. He's just like, yeah.
Ooh, Darth
dear.
Maul treatment there.
I don't know. I don't think that when I say duality, I don't know that.
If you're just talking about uncertainty, then I think that that's not the right word to use. Because I won't deny that
Well,
uncertainty
I
exists.
don't know that Taoists would be uncomfortable with the idea of balance or things happening in harmony being
Yeah, but that's-
identified as two different things.
No,
Again,
I think they would. Because I think that's the
it's-
entire point of Taoism is to break
in
down
the
those
same way that the
dichotomies.
well, in the same way that the unity of God, if you want to call, because again, the Tao is arguably their universal.
It's more like their logos.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, fine, but
But again, what does that? I mean,
but my point is, in the same representation of the Trinitarian context of God is one, but He's also three. It's the duality of harmony and balance within
that's not a duality.
the
though.
universe.
That's where
but
I'm
it's
saying I'm not
also
sure why
got
that word is the one you'd choose. Do I want to involve myself in this execution? Because I don't think I want Kuga either.
Leading warriors is a big responsibility. I'm going to relieve you of it.
Do I need to kill him? I don't really want either of these guys. I do need to recruit some more people, so I guess I gotta pick one. Between the two, I'd take Kuga, despite his atrocious helmet. Pin him. There you go, get him. Free hit. So I guess I'll just sit and watch, I guess. Seems like Kuga's got this. Oh, come on!
So you return from the dead. No matter. I will send you back there again.
Come on and try it. I think you got bigger fish to fry right now, pal. How about the guy who's hacking you up? Okay, he's calling on backup. He's being a coward. Okay, he just summons Caragors out of his butt.
I don't think that's where that trumpet is. That was actually just a really loud passing of gas.
Okay, this has turned into an absolute cacophony. Even still, he's terrible. Oh, no, 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 no. Ah, okay. Oh, no, they're not both broken. There was a Caragor broken. I thought both of them were dying at the same time. Die, sons.
Great example of Taoistic duality is inactive activity or active inactivity.
See, that's where I don't think... I think that... You're
I'm
taking
not
those
trying
words
to-
too literally because those weren't intended... You two are twins! Those are the same man!
It's a glitch in the
That
matrix.
that's how we describe it in English because it's the only way
Yes,
to describe
I
it in English,
agree.
but they're not... I don't think they would agree that they're describing two things.
100% in the same way.
But that's not duality then!
But
Two words for one thing does not make it two
In the
things.
same way that us describing Jesus, the Holy Spirit, or God in three different persons, but also
Okay.
the same person. I mean, it's like, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but
It's-
okay, I think you're... Oh, that was the wrong
I
one.
don't disagree.
You're
that-
setting yourself up, I think, very poorly by attempting to apply truth to the one part of Christianity that is unknowable by definition.
It's not unknowable.
It is for now. Like, someday we'll know how it works.
That's my point.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying you're now trying to say, well, we use three words for this, but it's like, okay, yes, great. Choose the most complicated part of the Christian theology
Well, I
to
mean,
try to derive
Taoist-
truth from.
So is the Tao, though.
No, because it's not trying to describe three things as one.
No, it's trying to describe
It's trying to describe the entire
within the universe. That's a fairly
That's
broad thing to do as well.
not exactly though, because the argument to say all things are one is actually far simpler than to say these specific three things are one. Because to say three things are one is to say they are combined, but there are things outside them. Because now you're having to draw three things with barriers that don't exclude each other, but do exclude everything else. It's a far easier thing to just say all these things are one big thing.
But I don't.
That's
but
much
see,
easier
that's
to
where
do.
But that's where I go.
If you're going to try to say that these three things have to coexist while also excluding all other things, that's a much harder task. Whereas to say all things are one thing is literally just, it's basically the philosophical equivalent of the Klein bottle with one surface. The Klein bottle has no inside or outside. It is only one surface.
I don't know that I'm familiar with that.
You've seen it even if you aren't familiar with the name of it. It's the bottle, it's the flask that has the little tube that goes back inside of itself. Are you familiar with a Mobius strip?
Yeah.
It's a 3D version of a Mobius strip where it has only one side because it flips midway through.
Gotcha.
So that's the point, is saying to say that the entire universe is that, where there is nothing outside of it and it's all just one big thing, that's easier than to say, no, these three things, which we view as separate, are actually one, but the things that aren't these three are still excluded. To say everything's included is just like, well, okay, the universe is one big thing and it can't truly be separated. But to say that the Trinity is
duality even in that I say again, I think you're hearing duality as somehow in opposition to being able to say there is connectedness or unity within that. I don't see duality as not being tied together. Again, I can look at a quarter and say the head and the tail have duality, but it's also the same quarter. But you're not seeming to want to do that within your own, and that's fine.
Well, because you're still describing them as separate things, though, by even calling them heads and tails, or one side and the other. You're still describing them as if they were two separate things.
Yes.
But the argument is they're not two separate things.
Well, okay.
I mean, it's not a great example, honestly, with a
Neither
quarter,
are
because it's a
atoms.
3D
again, this is where we
because it's a
go-
3D object that theoretically you could cut a quarter in half and have the head and the tail.
Well, this is where we come down to it, and I said this in the discussion that we had before, too, about when we got to Adam Savage and the whole, you can't, when you get to, when he talks about his micro adjustments on, I can't remember what the actual, it's not atoms. I can't remember what they are.
You can't measure atoms.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying. It's not atoms, it's, I'll have to send you the video again. He's basically saying there's even such fluctuation based on even just pressures and temperature and all that kind of stuff within these small measurement tools that something isn't sure at
Well, but the difficulty with that is that all dimensions are constructs as well. You're again trying to find truth in social constructs.
Well, that's not okay. That's hardly.
No, a dimension is absolutely a social construct. Simply because the whole world uses them doesn't make it any less social.
We identify ourselves separate from atoms, but the reality is we're all made up of atoms, including everything around us. So we're all just one big thing. I mean, that's the same thing.
No, because when I'm saying dimensions, we all use one dimension now. Well, actually, that's not even entirely true, but we all recognize the dimensions of different. There's two sets of dimensions. There's the metric and the imperial dimensions, and that's it. But that isn't how it used to be. It used to be that various communities would measure things in different units because they just had different things available to measure things from. So simply the fact that all of the world now recognizes the same units does not make them any less socially constructed.
No, I'm not talking about the
So
same
when you
units.
get
You're
into
missing
fine
my
levels,
point.
you're saying, well, there
My
isn't
point
such a
is-
thing as an inch. An inch is a construct based on the fact that we all agreed that this
And
thing
it's a way of
represents the
scientifically
inch.
measuring something.
But you could
what
also
I'm saying
measure
is
things
that-
in cans of soda because all these cans of soda are the same, or not,
Right.
or close enough to the same that they would function as tools of measurement.
But that's what Adam Savage actually gets to in this video, is basically, especially when you get down to where you're doing such finite, detailed work, where you're using these, and I can't remember what it was. It was either a weight thing or a.
No, they're talking about they're blocks that you're used for measuring like the fractions of inches, like thousandths and tens of thousands.
Right, and he basically says like this is supposed to represent this, but there's variation on a given day between what this was and what this is today. Like because
Yeah, but that's
of
because
simply-
dimensions don't exist. Dimensions are social constructs, so they have to tie back to physical objects. It's impossible to measure a thing without a physical object. Even a ruler that has inches on it, those inches don't exist. The ruler is the only thing that exists.
Yes, but my point is
There is no such thing as an inch without something on which the inch is displayed.
of course, but what I'm
So if
saying
you're
is
trying
the
to-
measurement, the actual tool of measurement varies.
I would
What he
actually
was getting at. He actually basically said it varies because of barometric pressure,
Sure, I'm not
temperatures, all those
denying
kinds
that,
of
but that
things.
point is dimensions don't exist, so what does that prove?
What it states,
Like, you're trying to say, well, then, if you're trying to say that therefore means that there is no such thing as truth because even
no, it's not
the
about
tools by
there's
which
no
we
such
measure
thing
truth
as
are inaccurate, it's like...
variable. It's movement. It's.
But again, you're talking about a
fluctuation.
social
It's this-
construct, and all social constructs are movable. Like, if you're attempting to say that simply because this one thing that we consider to be true is actually a social construct, therefore truth doesn't
It's
exist.
not that we consider it to be true; it's that it is an accepted truth. It's
That's
not.
the exact same sentence you just said twice.
But
Something that is accepted to be true is a social construct still. Because you're saying it's accepted to be true, therefore it is
Sure.
true, and I'm denying that claim.
so you're saying you don't think that that's true?
No, I think that something
measurement is
simply
true.
that, well, measurement is a useful convenience that makes life a whole lot easier.
Sure.
But it doesn't actually, an inch doesn't exist outside of the social conventions that declare it to exist. It's not unlike currency. The only reason you can trade money for things is because we've all agreed that money is worth something. It's like money has no value in and of itself because if
Sure.
if, for example, everyone decided we're just not going to accept dollars anymore, then dollars would cease to have value.
Correct.
So they only have the value they have, or they only measure the value they measure, because that's what we've agreed they measure. So to look for them as an example of where truth can be found is I think, not the right way. Because
so, again,
it's a
when
social
I come
construct.
back to where can truth be found? Because social constructs, and this is again where I come back to, because of the fact that man
But I think
is the one who's engaging these kinds of questions. I know you don't specifically, get out of the way, Karagor, you dumb. I don't
Just have
want
us
to
tear
do this
down.
with you. I really don't.
is it true that countering is the only way? Because it seems like it is. And that
And
just
apparently
seems,
I suck at it because
just
it's not
seems like a
working for me.
bad mechanic if that's the only way to do it. Oh, execute him! Hack him! I still think you're coming down to the question. The question you're asking is how do we know truth, which is not the same thing as what is truth.
Where you don't like that, which is the whole man is the measure of all things context of the point in that statement is that humanity is the one that is engaging these kinds of things. So if that happened,
Okay, he died far away. By means unknown. I mean, we know how, but we have no clue why that was shown to us. Well, that would prove the social construct theory, which is basically saying man can choose whatever he wants to be the social construct. We can all agree on something. I'm saying simply the agreement is not what makes a thing true.
now, is Karagor gonna get promoted now? Karagor killed me. Therefore, he's gonna be the next captain. Did that actually happen at one
Never.
point?
Of course not.
You
So-
say, of course not.
Of
but
course
didn't
it
we have
hasn't,
the
because we'd
weird-
have Karagors in the army if we had them.
He's in the army now.
So all the issue that well, is Ronk finally gonna? The issue we seem to be facing is that you keep trying to redound to like certainty or agreement as being part of the recipe for truth.
No, what I'm saying is on a practicality level.
But I'm not
in
talking
the
about
same way,
practicality.
no, I am.
Okay, but then that doesn't make it truth just because it's practically acceptable. This is Hume's argument.
What?
You don't know that the sun's going to rise tomorrow. That you can't know it simply
Yes.
because it has every day since, or every day since the dawn of time. So we can have near effective certainty that it will rise. But the point is that's not actually the same thing. It's enough certainty that there's no reason to question it, but that's not true certainty. Therefore, you go,
Nothing is true certainty.
Well, yeah, but that's where I'm saying I don't think certainty is required.
So then, again, I come back to what is truth, and how would you?
I don't think truth is the
Identify.
measurement of certainty.
Okay, then what is it the measurement of?
I'm not sure that I would say truth is measuring anything, because measurement, as we've just said, is a construct. I think that there are things. I mean, it'd be very reductive, but it's like a truth is a microcosm of reality. To put it in about as confusing a term as it could be possibly put. I'm killing too many people. I'm not recruiting too many people, but that's because none of these guys have names I want. Krosh.
Whoa, go back. What's his name?
I don't know how you'd pronounce that.
Krosh. Krosh.
Call him Crotch. Crotch rot. How about that? I need a guy.
Lucky Crotch.
I need a guy, so I guess it's him.
Lucky de la Crotch.
So
I think that you are personally, I believe that you're misconstruing the way that the Taoists approach balance being a part of the universe's nature, because I don't know that they somehow see it as a denial of uniqueness or of differentiation, I suppose I would say it that way.
Differentiation is a construct, and I think that they would agree with that. It's like things are not different just because you say they are.
No, they're different because they are made to be different.
No, because most things can't be separated. Like, most things are one thing. They can't truly be distinguished, because if you tried to go down the list of here's exactly how this thing differs from that thing, you would end up encompassing everything. In the same way that it's like, you can't, for example, define a color without it having a shape. Because if it didn't have a shape, you wouldn't be seeing it. Even if it's not a shape that we have a classification for, you could argue like, well, what if it's just a blob? Well, then it's that shape. A blob is still a shape. And similarly, you can't define a shape without it having color. Because otherwise, how would you distinguish it from any other shape? So it's like, you can't distinguish these things. You might think that you can, because obviously your perception, the mind is good at identifying things, but that doesn't mean that it's good at classifying things. You can know that you're seeing a thing without actually being able to describe what it is and how it's different from anything else. You can't describe something without describing its environment, because how would you know to separate it from its environment? It's like, therefore, every description of an object contains within... This is exactly the point of the net of diamonds, which is a Taoist, I guess, parable you could call it, or more of an allegory, saying if you had a net where at all points of intersection was a diamond, then and each diamond was perfect clarity, any diamond you looked in would contain the reflections of all the others. So the only way you would always be viewing it at once. You'd be seeing the whole thing all the time. Even if you were looking at a part of it, you'd be seeing the whole thing. That is sort of...
that I don't disagree with.
That's the nature of Taoism, is saying you can't separate a thing by saying, well, it's these two halves of it are different, because the fact that the definition requires the reference of the other means that they're not actually different. Get out of here, you're not my target. It's like if you can't define something without bringing in its opposite, then they're not actually opposites. If one definition requires another, then those are not two different things. So you were the guy I was after. Well, then what was this guy that was causing trouble?
Those legs. You know, I pride myself on being able to spot those things. I'm a bit of a collector.
I don't know that
This is why, isn't it the Taoist
100%
proverb
agree
that
with
says
the-
if you could truly understand a blade of grass, you would understand
Yeah.
the universe?
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because you couldn't truly, fully understand a blade of grass. You can, this is again why I brought up Hume, you can achieve a level of, I guess you could call it certainty or confidence, that would allow you to operate in the world without constantly being thwarted by things being different than you expect. But that doesn't mean that you have the full understanding. Because that's why they say if you were to fully understand a blade of grass, you would understand the universe. You could look at a blade of grass and have enough knowledge of it to be able to rely on it, to know where it was and how it could serve a need you had, but that wouldn't be the same as having full understanding of it.
But I don't know that I agree that things that are the antithesis of one another somehow are the same thing.
They have to be, because they
No,
can't.
that would suggest that even something like God and the antithesis of God would be the same, and that's not the case.
The argument, well, that wouldn't be too far from an Augustinian argument that there is actually no such thing as an antithesis to God.
I certainly don't agree with that because there
Because
is
Satan's
no,
not God's equal.
There is not.
Satan
I
is
agree.
under God, therefore he's not the antithesis of God.
I agree with the sentiment that he is under God. I don't agree that God himself has any evil in him.
It
Therefore,
doesn't,
there's
because
not,
evil doesn't exist in the Augustinian framework. Evil is lack of good, that's all. It is the vacuum, it is a vacuum left behind by absence of good. That's
that is caused by what?
not caused by anything. But I'm saying the argument is that God has no antithesis, that's why he's God. The Manichaean heresy would be to suggest that God and Satan are co-eternal equals.
No, I don't agree with that.
Well, exactly, because that is a heresy. Saying God has no antithesis, therefore there is no such thing that like God must contain evil. It's like, well, no, he doesn't, because there is actually no antithesis.
But my point is, like matter and non-matter, you have to. Those things are not the same thing. Therefore, they are defined as
They
two
are.
different
Well,
things. And
They're
yet
defined
you're
in terms of
saying-
each other, therefore they are one thing. You can only define matter truly by defining antimatter. You can only define antimatter by defining matter. Therefore, they're the same thing. It's not a perfect analogy. It sort
This
of
is
is.
why I come back
It
to
necessitates
duality,
a
'cause I
great
don't-
deal of thought. But essentially, the Alan Watts quote I found most poignant about this is saying, what does it mean to be stuck in a trap you can't get out of? And he's not just saying on an emotional level you feel as though you can't get out of it. It means no matter what you did for 1,000 years, you would never get out of this trap. Because it is physically and logically impossible. And the reason I say logically is because there's physical impossibilities and there's logical impossibilities. So for our understanding, it is impossible to travel faster than the speed of light. That is simply a scientific principle. It, as far as we know, can never be broken, but we can't be certain. And this is why science fiction is possible, because you could say, well, let's posit a discovery in physics that would enable that would change our understanding, and that's how in this sci-fi universe they have faster than light travel. But that is a physical impossibility, whereas you have something like a logical possibility, which is to say a four-sided triangle. That's a logical impossibility, meaning nothing you can do creates that.
Only because of language.
Well, not exactly, because the argument that you're saying is, well, to do that would simply be to change the name of the triangle. Is to say,
yes, but
to make
again,
it to
what
call
is a triangle
if
but
you,
a social construct? You're back
well,
to the argument you were making
because
before.
numbers are not social construct. Numbers exist. Mathematics is not socially constructed. I don't believe. So the concept
I don't believe they're socially constructed.
The concept of
only
a three-sided shape, like, yes, the name for it is socially constructed. I'll agree with you there.
And our understanding of it is.
Well, no.
Yeah.
No,
because
a
the
shape
way
with
that-
3 sides is a shape with 3 sides no matter what culture you're in. Because
But
3
what
is 3.
three sides is determined by the
No.
social construct.
No, because 3 is 3. Math is one of the things where it's like I don't. Because when I said, okay, an inch is a social construct because there is no such thing as an inch without the object on which the inch is displayed, whereas 1, you could have 1. It doesn't matter what the 1 is because it would still be 1. It could be 1, not even of a measurement. It could be just 1 thing, 1 stone. I mean, so I think that's numbers, and numbers are honestly more tenuous. The idea of was math discovered or invented? I'm honestly not sure about that question.
I think it's discovered. I mean, I certainly don't disagree with you.
But that implies that
but
it
see,
that
I
it is
feel
not
that
a
way about
construct.
anything that we on a human level have found to be true is that we have unearthed what God has already left for us there to find. So I don't know that I think there's anything that we have.
Well, I think math is like that. I'm not sure that language is like that. I don't think God created language for us to discover. It's not
No,
like
that's true.
The man who first gave a name to a thing did not discover that name; he created it.
No, that I agree with.
Whereas
because
math, I
obviously-
think, is like I don't think a man, other than again the name. But that's what makes it difficult. Is you're saying, okay, the only way to make 1 not 1 is simply to call it something else, but that doesn't change what it is. So you can't have a 4-sided triangle unless you just change what the word triangle means. Triangles would have to become rectangles in that case. But you cannot make I guess here's the better word, rather than using the word triangle. You cannot make, that is some awful hair. You cannot make a object with 3 sides have 4 sides. That's, I guess, the better way of putting it. You can't, rather than using the
without
social...
changing what that means. Yeah.
No. No. I'm saying you cannot make a 4-sided object have 3 sides or reverse. Like that is a definition, because you're literally saying the definition of the thing is that it has 3 sides. So you cannot make it have 4 sides without changing the thing entirely. That's my point. So now the trouble is, I was describing logical impossibility. So that's when Alan Watts says of the trap you can't get out of, he's not just simply saying a physical impossibility, he's saying a logical impossibility. You're saying a trap, truly speaking, that cannot be escaped. Not just that you are incapable of escaping it, but that the trap itself is inescapable by its definition. If that's the case, you and the trap are one thing. This is the reason he uses this is his example of enlightenment. Is the moment you realize that you and the trap are one thing, you are no longer trapped, because you can't be trapped in.
But again, that's not a practical use, because I am still.
No.
Yes,
That's where
this is where I say then you're making it so universal that there is no distinction between you, I, anybody else.
That's what
God.
Taoism is entirely about.
I understand that on a Taoistic level is where how they describe and understand their world. However, the issue with that is that then nothing can be distinct.
That is the Taoist aim.
I agree. I just don't agree with it.
Okay, but now you're just arguing whether or not that itself is true. Which,
Sure.
again, that's a valid question. But I'm saying my only refutation was that duality doesn't exist.
Well, but my point is, it has to exist because you just demonstrated
does
that universality can't.
No.
Because you and I are not the same.
You're simply disagreeing with it. You're simply agreeing, I don't think universality can exist. That's why you're settling on duality.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, no, you didn't say that that's not what they're thinking. You're just saying, well, I don't agree with them, but that's not the same claim.
No, that's not the same claim as what?
This is the only way an Uruk can get promoted around here.
To say
was
that you
never
simply, I
saying-
don't agree with that Taoist construction does not make that Taoist construction not true, though. I was using that as a refutation of saying, well, that is my answer to the concept of duality, is that there
So,
isn't.
in other words, you ascribe to Taoism in the sense of
Oh, he's
total
another
and in
doofus.
I don't understand why they have to have the weird
Well, he needs a gimmick.
a gimmick.
He's got to make himself look different than the others.
I just died, so.
I gotta pee is what I gotta do.
My point is, You, it sounds like, are more inclined. I don't know that I would say you're at the point of just saying this is what you ascribe to, but to just say there's universality across the board and there is no distinction between you, I, anybody else, God, nobody. And I don't know that I concur with that, and that's why I say duality makes more sense to me in its context of
It makes perfect. I mean, it makes sense, but again, that doesn't make it correct. Plenty of things make sense that still aren't true.
Sure, but I mean, in the same way that universality isn't, it's not that it doesn't make sense, it's that it could also not be true. I mean, I'm not suggesting that.
Well, sure, and
I'm just saying, for me, at least on a practical level, coming back to how you frame your own philosophy, I would say duality is far more agreeable to me in how I would even understand something such as truth, because there's duality in many other contexts of my understanding. And now part of that may be a very Western idea, which I'm sure it is, but that's at least the way that I kind of land on that. And you may not. That's fine. I don't know where you land on it.
Well, but see, now it seems though that you're just saying, well, you're falling back on the uncertainty. Just going, well, we can't know.
No, I'm saying...
Therefore, I'm just going to choose what makes the most sense to me. And it's like, well, that's fair, because that's kind of all you can do is just say,
well, that is all we
just
can
take
do.
What makes the most sense.
But I'm trying to understand. Okay.
That's
Rash.
quite a helmet. Had to have
His
it custom
name is
fitted for
Rash.
his neck.
I don't know whether we want him or not. He seems a little interesting.
I'm not convinced. Morganton.
But
Well, what was?
it sounds like my point in even discussing duality was, again, I already went into this discussion knowing I probably was going to be more inclined to say this is a part of my philosophical understanding, and I was assuming that yours was going to be not specifically completely in discord with it, but certainly that you would ascribe to something more in line with singularity, and it sounds like you do, but correct me if I'm wrong in that.
I mean, I don't. The question I would have is why use the word duality at all, given the questions it raises.
What does that mean?
Well, it's like, what are you? It seems like all that is a framework to just say to make uncertainty more palatable to you.
Yes,
Okay.
that's true.
Because then it just seems like a perceptual.
It's not simply
You
a
haven't
perceptual
changed
thing.
the nature of the universe simply by defining it differently. I guess that's my whole point of bringing the Taoist argument into it at all, is by saying you haven't actually changed anything other than, I guess, your own viewpoint, but that hasn't made the world any different.
That's true, because I believe that, like you said, in the same way that I don't have to be present when a tree falls in order to know that it makes a sound. That whole context. I mean, it's the
Okay, that should've-
Did you seriously just resheath your sword and then pull it out again?
He should have smacked him while
You
he
gave
was
him
down.
temporary hope, and then you killed him after that. It's not just to pander to my own, like, okay, I would clarify this. It's not some sort of a dissonance or, a cognitive dissonance that I go, I must have no cognitive dissonance, therefore I need to use duality in order to offset that. My point is, I see it throughout other parts of... What even is that?
Dumb insects come around randomly. And now I have been poisoned, probably.
Yeah.
Dumb thing. You're dying today. What? Get back here.
Again, in the state that humanity is in relation to God, in the state of how God is a multiplicity and a unification in one. I mean, there's many things, not just strictly. I mean, again, you made the critique that obviously I chose a very difficult to define theological principle within Christian faith, but I'm not intending to just simply dwell on the things that are difficult to define. I think that universally across the board, there's things that require a both and, not an either or, in other words. And that both and...
Okay, but either or would be the duality. Both and is not duality. Both and is singularity.
But its duality is them both at the same time. That's why I say...
See, that's... No, I don't think that... They can't be both. Both and implies not being different. I guess, because
agree.
two things can't be the same, two different things at the same time.
You can't have both if it's
You can't
not
have
distinct.
light and dark at the same time. Because...
That would be very much in contrast to yin-yang.
Okay, because light and dark are defined by each other.
Right.
And that doesn't... I'm saying that, but they cannot...
They depend on each other, but that doesn't mean that they're not... This is why I'm saying... I'm not disagreeing with you that it's hard to define. There's parts of me that I go, I agree that it is oneness, but it's constantly in relation to one another. I don't think
but that's singularity.
True.
That's saying everything is like that, though. Some things are more easily put out of the mind. You could argue.
How so?
As in, there are certain things that you don't have to think about the ways in which they are combined or the way in which they rely on the definitions of one another. Whereas certain things definitely do require the definitions of one another. Like, certain things you can't escape their closeness. There's other things you can, but the point is, if you're going to understand anything fully, you have to understand everything surrounding it. And then if you're going to understand those things, you have to understand the things that surround them, and so you end up being the only complete understanding of a thing is the understanding of the universe. And I'm not saying that that's attainable. I'm just saying that means that all you are living with at every other point is an amount of certainty that is not full, but is at least good enough to get by.
But again, that's a practical...
Well, yeah, that is, but that's...
It's a way in which you frame the world that allows you to interact within it sensibly.
Yeah, because you don't have to have full certainty to be able to interact, because otherwise you'd never get anything done.
Agreed.
But that doesn't mean that...
But in any given moment...
There isn't such a thing as that true, full definition, just because you don't need it or know it.
Sure.
Like, again, I don't believe that the truth has to be of use to be the truth. Like, I'm not a pragmatist, I guess, is the simplest way of boiling that down. It's like, I don't... Okay. What? Why do I get no chance?
Yeah, what was that? That was Eye of Sauron.
He
What did
pulled
it say?
some kind of thing on me and it prevented me from...
Is that
dumb.
like a higher level guy, though?
No,
Is
that's
he
just what that curse
food chain?
does. I don't know why it involved me not getting a chance, unless maybe he's got some unique thing that does that. I don't know. I'm not necessarily espousing any of the views I'm debating. I'm simply saying that I don't... Like, I'm not convinced either of the Taoist narrative. I'm simply saying...
Well, but see, there's parts of it that I agree with. That's why it's so hard. I'm not fully disagreeing with you, nor was I ever trying to somehow make that a villainized argument. I was saying...
Hey, Booth wins.
Oh, yeah. Are we gonna gain him and his
Well, he's getting
nipple pouch?
he's too high level probably now.
Is he now? That would be dumb.
I mean, we could still do it. We just have to take him down a few pegs before we
I
could do it.
probably need your help.
Well, I'm not being much help apparently.
Um,
So the question is, do we go on? Is this a two-parter, or are we stopping so I can pee?
well, we can stop.
Because I mean, if it's a two-parter,
This is true.
I mean, we could just pause, or I will
no,
stop.
We'll just stop right here and
But we will
pick it
bring
up.
light back.
Well, that's a pause then, not a stop.
Sure. Universe is difficult to define.
Well, that's Yes, that is the case. In fact, I think I revealed even my own. I think because I just contradicted myself a second ago when I was saying, well, light and dark can't coexist, and yet, in a Taoist framework, I suppose that you would have to argue that they do, which is like what I was saying earlier, where there are things where the difference between them is easier, or the connection between them is easier to ignore due to their apparent difference.
Right.
And light and dark is one of those because you think, well, you can't turn on a light without the dark leaving. But you wouldn't know that there was any light unless the dark left.
Yeah.
Which means the dark, again, that's the trap they can't get out of.
Yeah.
The dark can't escape the light, even though the light is on. So it's like, that's what I suppose does make it that. So my constant redounding to it is not to say, well, that makes it the correct truth. Rather, it is just another form of faith that's required to say, well,
True.
I have to accept the connection between these two things that seem inherently opposed. And in some ways, that's precisely what Taoism is in some ways, it's sort of convincing yourself of that despite the evidence of your senses. And that's why that one passage, the Alan Watts passage about the trap you're not get out of, is good, because he describes that as being an analogy for finding enlightenment. Is you will only get to the point of faith when you have become fully convinced that you can't get out of the trap.
Yeah.
Because as long as you think you can, you'll view it as something separate from you.
Yeah.
Whereas once you accept, I cannot, by whatever I do, get out, you realize, well, you and the trap are one thing, and then you are free. Not because I've finally broken the trap, but you realize that the trap, you aren't different from the trap. Therefore, you're not actually trapped. You are just in a state that you thought was a trap. The other analogy is walking through a door only to turn around and see that there wasn't a door. Is you thought you were escaping something only to realize that you're still in the same space. And it is in many ways a faith thing, because only when you have tried everything else will you fully accept that truth.
Which is why I think that...
Or accept it as truth, or I guess accept it to be correct.
Right.
If we want to try to avoid truth, since it is such a difficult thing to define. Because I'm not saying that Taoism is true, in that that's why language is imprecise. In the finite, not finite, but in the fixed sense of like the one truth.
Right.
I don't know that that's the case. If you would have to, you could come to that belief by this recognition and this process of seeing things that seem different as the same, which is in some ways a faith-based exercise. So I'm not saying that it is true in that sense. I'm simply saying that it is a way of viewing the world that is internally consistent. Because
Sure.
the best you can do in the aim of truth is probably the best is to just eliminate the frameworks which are internally inconsistent. Because those can be easily written off.
Yes.
Then
100%.
when you're left with a bunch of internally consistent frameworks that might seem different, I mean, it's a little bit of this is why the idea that there isn't truth has never been something that inspired me, because it eliminates all conversation. What's the point of asking?
Sure.
The correct and more, in fact, not even just correct, but I think more honest and more interesting is, I don't know what it is, but I believe that it exists.
Yeah.
And I believe that the question of what it is the better question, rather than whether or not it exists.
Yeah.
Because if you just say, well, truth doesn't exist, well, then there's no use in the conversation.
No, that's true.
But to say, I believe it exists, but I don't know what, that at least that's a starting point.
Right. And then to try to hash that out in detail, to go, there are certain things that, again, require consistent... the notion of ongoing refining and sharpening and... it's a bit like bringing things down to that quantum level again, as we talked about earlier, because
I need to find...
it is I mean, that is
There's
the whole,
another.
everything has to be consistent across the board.
Well, yeah.
Otherwise
There's
not.
another Alan Watts lecture in which he describes what I can't recall the names of the philosophies, which is one of the reasons I've been having a hard time finding the lecture. But essentially, he describes there's two opposing views of matter and reality and basically all things, where there's the... It's how without knowing the names of them, it's going to be almost impossible to portray this. But there's the belief that there is, in fact, no higher order things. There are simply subatomic particles that come together in various ways.
Right.
And what we perceive as differences aren't real.
Right.
And that all that we are, this is a very not materialistic, for lack of, that's not the right term he used. But it's essentially a materialistic argument that nothing above subatomic particles exists and everything else is simply a perception that is a construct. Then there's the opposite people who believe that no, the constructs exist and these subatomic pieces are actually only parts of those constructs, in a similar way that you might argue that you could argue that a crowd only exists because it's made up of people, or that people only exist to make up a crowd. And it's basically one's a top-down, one's a bottom-up view of the world. But the reason... what's all this weirdness? The reason the argument was interesting, and I thought the lecture was good, is that he shows that if you push either ideology to its extreme, it flips.
Right.
Because you can push one group so far into the infinitesimal side that they end up flipping out back over, and you end up getting to the, well, it has to all be one big thing.
Right.
Which makes you now, you're a collectivist, not in the political sense, but in the... It's like now you believe in the giant abstract beliefs rather than... And then if you push the other people, they'll end up having to choose a finite point at some point. And if it's a shame that I cannot find it because I cannot relay it accurately, but I also can't find it because I can't relay it accurately. I don't know what the philosophies he was discussing were.
That balance is actually...
He often describes it as prickles and goo. That was the joke. That's the rather than refer to it by these philosophical names the whole time, he describes them as the prickly people and the gooey people. He says when you push them far enough, the gooey people, you only get people who are prickly goo and gooey prickles.
Yeah, it's rather beautiful if you think about it, because it reminds me, I think on an Eastern philosophical level they would understand this better, and I would say philosophy in the broadest sense, not in the like classical philosophy, but in the what people think of themselves and the way that they interact with the world. Eastern culture certainly interacts on a more collectivist level, not even only politically, although that's certainly true, but in the way that they perceive to be of use in society and even morally good in society is like, hey, I need to support the broader group, whereas that is not at all in our individualistic Western society. That's not at all how we aren't benefited from benefiting the whole. We're out for ourselves.
Yeah, but see, then
it's like,
even in the Randian sense, I mean, this is one of the things Jordan Peterson talks about, because I think in some ways you could argue that he is sort of a Ayn Rand properly, what's the word? There's a psychological term that's escaping me. Integrated. Because the thing that, and in fact, I think Ayn Rand gets a bad rap, because the concept of rational self-interest, which she unfortunately chose to call selfishness, which basically scuppered the whole endeavor because no one was willing to accept it by calling it that. But the definition she proposes is what many people now call rational self-interest, which means I am obviously seeking my own betterment.
Yeah.
But a well-adjusted person recognizes that their own betterment is the betterment of others.
Right.
To some extent, at least.
It's interdependence,
because
not codependence.
If you were just a sociopath who abused and extracted resources from others, that doesn't work long term.
Yeah.
You will eventually run out of people who you can abuse, because eventually you'll have to. I mean, this is why sociopaths have to skip town frequently.
Right.
So it's going, okay, the people in this area have become too wary of my tricks. They've caught on, so I have to. It's like being a con man. It's like I have to go to find people who aren't aware of what I'm going to do to them.
Right.
So that is not a long-term strategy. The longest-term strategy, this is what Jordan Peterson talks about, is what's the word he uses? Darn it. Wow. One of the terms that people use is subsidiarity, which I don't know the definition of to use in this context. The other one that I've heard Jordan Peterson use is reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Where you're saying you are most benefited when you are of benefit to others, because you create a stronger network than you could ever have had on your own.
Yeah. 3 chords and all that.
Well, yeah, and that's where I'm saying I think that's it. Yeah, it's one of those situations where I've now forgotten how we got onto that thread of it, because that was meant to argue a different point.
You were talking about pushing one side or the other, and I think it's beautiful because that balance is what I was getting at. Is
of the Eastern versus Western culture. So it's like that's where you'd recognize that that's the harmony between them.
Correct.
Is your best interest is the best, or is the interest of maybe not the majority, because that
the group,
the concept of what is the majority ends up becoming the difficult question of communism. Certainly wasn't for the good of all people.
Right.
But you'd have to essentially, it's because there's definitely some people, obviously, if there are sociopaths within a society, your good will not be their good.
Yeah.
So you can't assume that, well, if I just benefit them, they'll benefit me. It's like, well, no, there's definitely people for whom they will never, that reciprocity requires them to give back too.
Their good.
You can't have reciprocity.
Their good is defined literally by them not giving back.
Yeah, you can't define reciprocity with someone. It can't go one way, because that's the definition of reciprocity, or it's not the definition of reciprocity. So it is a bit of a society which sacrifices the individual to the collective is wrong, and the society that sacrifices the collective to the individual is wrong.
Correct.
There has to be that recognition of. I mean, it's not unlike the, was it Nehemiah or Ezra, the book, where it's basically saying, build your own part of the wall.
It's Nehemiah. That's what I'm
saying. Because it's your own defense, but once it's built, all of us are safe. It's like you put special effort into it because it's right in front of your house, and you definitely want that part of the wall to be strong. But if everyone's doing that, then we're going to have a really strong wall, and it's going to get built in record time.
Right.
So you have to just sort of acknowledge that's the thread.
The kind of, and that's what I guess I was getting at, and maybe duality is a poor frame for that. Because it's too akin to
dualism, which I think is a negative. Because dualism definitely is the idea that, well, these two things are actually true separately at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's just not the case.
That's an interesting statement. I wonder whether that would maybe be an interesting thought.
Well, that's dualism is simply a slightly pared down version of relativism, where relativism is all things are true at the same time.
Right. And that's
like,
but is that the same as duality? I wonder whether we could actually extrapolate the two. I wonder if that's different.
Well, I mean, if only in that duality does specify two rather than all.
Yeah.
Because again, you can't. It's like. I mean, I guess this brings the truth question back into it, as you're saying. I mean, this is why the phrase absolute truth often gets used to clarify, because true often is used in a logical argument to simply say, for example, that all three of the Abrahamic faiths cannot be true because
meaning Islam,
Judaism, and Christianity cannot all be true at the same time because they hold different beliefs.
Correct. Yeah,
they contradict one another. Yep. Again, in the same way that a four-sided object and a three-sided object can't be the same thing.
Right.
You might argue that, well, two of the sides could be the same, and then one. It's like, okay, but it's still not the same thing.
Two of the sides could be the same.
As in, you could theoretically draw a triangle and a rectangle overlapping such that two of the sides were the same. But that would not make them the same shape.
Right.
So that's the issue, is that relativism tries to say, well, we could all, it's the blind man and the elephant thing, where it's like, well, maybe we all have a piece of a larger whole, but it's like, yeah, but what if one blind man's touching the ground? He's not touching the elephant, and you can't just say, well, because we don't know, we'll have to assume you won't get the picture of the elephant if he's grabbing the wrong thing. So it's a
funky looking elephant.
So it's like, that's where I think that it just falls flat, because it in attempting to include everything, it just eliminates everything.
It'll end up looking like an elephant drawn by a 4-year-old. If you've seen one of those, it's like, great.
Oh, anyways.
Yeah. No, it's fun to try to do that, and honestly, it's always been I enjoy the fact that I do wrestle with these questions, because by and large, most, especially Westerners, if I could be so bold, choose to say, well, Western framework and ideation is good enough for me, so that's fine.
I don't think they even choose to say that. I just think they don't bother.
Right. And I think Alan Watts actually made the statement that it's part of the struggle is going to be kind of unthinking your Westernism to a degree, because they're in such distinct.
You can argue that you don't have to do that, though. Partially because you can't, and partially because that would assume that Eastern culture is the correct one.
Sure.
It's like, well, that's not necessarily the case either.
Right.
In fact, this is why I have such a fascination with both Stoicism and Taoism, is because they seem to be aiming at the same point from two different sides.
Right.
And apparently I still need to write that essay, which means I also need to understand both sides more.
Which essay again? Remind me.
I would like to actually. First, I suppose what I should do is see if such an essay already exists, because there may in fact be someone who's already beat me to it. But I think an idea of the exploration of the overlap of Taoism and Stoicism as kind of Eastern and Western philosophy meeting at the same point.
Yeah.
But I don't understand either of them enough to make that argument. But I do think that there's a fruit to the comparison.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, there you go.
Well, that was supposed to be a wrap up, and it ended up.
I think it's a wrap up. The bottom line is you can't wrap it up.
Well, you can. It just takes a really big wrap.
Well, you're wrapped up.